The hurricane was closing in and my 65-year-old husband abandoned me to be with his first love. I told him that I was terrified of the storm and begged him to stay, but he simply said, "Stop making a fuss. Renee is the one who's truly scared. She's always been afraid of weather like this. She needs me." Ever since Javier reunited with Renee, the first love he hadn't seen in 50 years, he had spent almost all his days rushing to see her, reminiscing about the past. Now, as the hurricane raged outside, he answered her call and immediately reached for his coat. The wind howled against the windows. I begged him to stay, even broke down in tears. But he looked at me and said, "Leslie, listen to me. Renee only came to this city because of me. I can't just leave her alone." The storm destroyed the home I had lived in for 40 years. Javier destroyed the marriage and love I had built with him. Later, when I filed for divorce, he refused to let go and followed me everywhere, pleading with me. "Leslie," he said, "it's always been you. I have only ever loved you." 2 weeks ago, a user named Hugh posted online, seeking help to find his mother's first love. His mother had met her first love as a teenager, but they were separated by misunderstandings, and now, 50 years later, she still couldn't let go of him. I was deeply moved by their love story. That was until the man's name and photo were revealed, and I realized they were searching for Javier, the man I had spent my entire life loving. The day Renee and Javier reconnected online, they met at the airport, embracing and wiping away each other's tears. Photos of them holding hands as they walked away together spread like wildfire across the internet. People celebrated their long-lost love, offering blessings for the couple who had finally reunited after half a century. Meanwhile, I, Javier's wife of over 40 years, was erased from their story as if I had never existed. Renee's return turned my life upside down. Javier arranged for her to stay at a hotel near our home, and for days he left early and returned late, spending all his time with her. Even at home, I could keep up with their activities through the photos shared by excited strangers online. Pictures of them attending concerts together, sitting close, their interactions far too intimate for mere old friends catching up. "Leslie, Renee and I haven't seen each other in decades. We're just reminiscing. Don't be upset. She'll leave in a few days and then everything will go back to the way it was." I looked at Javier. At 65, his hair had turned gray, but his posture remained straight, his frame still lean, traces of his youthful charm lingering. With a quiet sigh, I reached for his hand. "Javier, the weather's been bad these past few days and my leg's been acting up again. Could you stay home just for today?" He immediately turned to me, his concern genuine. "Are you feeling unwell again? Is it your joints? Did the pain flare up?" He gently lifted my leg onto his lap and began massaging it, the warmth of his palms spreading through me, stirring something deep inside. This pain had been with me ever since I gave birth to our child. Back then, Javier was at a crucial stage in his career, spending most of his time in the lab. I had been left to care for the baby alone, handling all the household chores on my own. Over the years, my health had declined, plagued by one ailment after another. Whenever the weather turned bad, my leg pain worsened. Javier had been massaging my legs for decades, but today he only gave a few perfunctory rubs before standing up. "Leslie, I promised Renee I'd meet her at a certain time. I need to go." I watched his retreating figure, catching the faint hint of excitement in his hurried steps. A bitter taste filled my mouth. Then, shaking my head, I let out a quiet, self-deprecating laugh. 40 years of marriage. We had weathered so much together. I should trust him. Yet the dull ache in my leg remained, throbbing persistently, refusing to be ignored by me. By evening, dinner was ready. No matter how many disagreements Javier and I had over the years, I never failed to prepare his breakfast and dinner just the way he liked. When we were young, money was tight. We spent years barely scraping by, often going to bed hungry. Back then, Javier would always push his plate toward me, insisting he wasn't hungry, coaxing me to eat first. Under the dim yellow light, his deep-set eyes were filled with tenderness and concern. But the truth was, he went hungry far too often during those years, and in the end he developed a chronic stomach condition. That youthful devotion left its mark on my heart, and perhaps that's why, even after all these years, I still preferred the warmth of soft, golden lighting. But tonight I didn't wait for Javier to come home. All I got was a hurried phone call. "Leslie, Renee's leg is bothering her. I'm taking her to the hospital. I won't be coming home tonight. Don't wait up for me." I stared at my phone, stunned. Javier had always been careful with my feelings. He had never hung up on me so abruptly before. Swallowing my anger, I forced myself to finish dinner and mechanically cleaned up the dishes. That night he didn't return and I didn't sleep. I lay awake, sifting through the decades we had spent together, reliving every moment of love and devotion that had long since become part of my very being. I couldn't sleep. The silence of the night weighed heavily on me, and without thinking, my feet carried me to his study. The familiar scent of aged paper and worn leather filled the room. I stood there taking it all in as if I could still sense his presence, sitting at his desk flipping through his books, completely absorbed in his own world. An ache curled in my chest. Driven by something I couldn't name, I reached for the books he used to read most often, running my fingers along their spines before pulling them off the shelf one by one. And then tucked inside one of them, a folded piece of paper slipped out and fluttered to the floor. A medical report. I picked it up, my fingers trembling as I unfolded it. The name at the top made my breath hitch, Renee. My chest tightened. I scanned the report, my heart pounding louder with each word. Her diagnosis, her condition, her leg. She had suffered an injury. One that left her in pain whenever the weather turned cold. Just like me. My grip on the paper tightened as a flood of memories crashed into me. Javier kneeling beside me, pressing his warm hands to my aching joints, the motion smooth and practiced. The way he had always known exactly where the pain was worst, exactly how much pressure to apply. 40 years. For 40 years he had been massaging my legs with a precision that now felt haunting. Because he had done it before. Because he had once done it for her. A choked sob escaped me. Tears blurred my vision as the weight of it all settled in. The decades we had shared, the love I had never questioned, the truth I had never considered. Had he been thinking of me all these years? Or had I merely been the one standing in the place where she used to be? I sank onto the chair, gripping the paper in my hands, my body shaking. I thought I had made peace with our past. But the past, it seemed, had not yet finished with me. At dawn, Javier finally came home looking exhausted. He carried a bag of croissants from my favorite bakery. He froze for a second when he saw me, a rare flicker of guilt flashing across his face. "You're up early," he said hesitantly. I studied him expressionlessly. "Javier, where did you sleep last night?" I was worried sick. "At the hospital," he said, stepping closer, reaching for my hand. "Renee's leg. She injured it years ago while trying to save me. Ever since then, bad weather makes it worse." At his words, I abruptly pulled my hand away. "Oh. So Renee's leg also aches when the weather turns." My voice was eerily calm. "Javier, all these years when you massaged my legs, were you thinking about me? Or her?" I knew I was being unreasonable. But after holding it in all night, I couldn't stop the fire burning inside me. Javier's expression darkened. "What are you even saying? After 40 years together, you're questioning my loyalty?" I folded my arms. "You still haven't answered my question. Are you feeling guilty? Guilt for how often he had thought of her. For how often her name had crossed his mind, even in the life we built together." Javier's temper flared. "Guilty of what? Leslie, we've spent over 40 years together and we still have many years ahead of us. But Renee, she only has these few days." His voice grew sharper. "She's waited 50 years for these few days. Can you stop making a scene? When did you become so unreasonable? What a ridiculous thing to say." I shut my eyes tightly, swallowing every emotion raging inside me. When I opened them again, I was calm. "Javier, if you care about Renee so much, there's another option." I met his gaze steadily. "Let's get a divorce. That way she can be the one to stay by your side for the rest of your days." Javier's eyes widened in shock. "Are you insane? Over something so trivial? Leslie, is this really necessary? After everything we've been through, do you still doubt my loyalty? Have you forgotten the vows we made back in college, to walk through life together?" To walk through life together, Javier, means to walk in the same direction. My voice was steady. "I'll give you some time. Ask yourself what it is you truly want." Renee wasn't alone in this city. Her son Hugh was here with her. She never needed Javier to stay by her side all night. Javier simply couldn't bring himself to let her go. I unilaterally fell into a cold war with Javier. I no longer did his laundry or cooked his meals. Every day I only made enough food for myself. He still went to see Renee every day, had his meals outside, and returned home late, carrying my favorite fruits and fresh flowers as if nothing had changed. He would chatter about his day, filling the air with mundane details, pretending our argument had never happened. I ignored him. Before I knew it, the hurricane was approaching. Having lived in Florida for years, I was no stranger to hurricanes. But this one was different, stronger, more menacing. The entire city braced itself. Our son Daniel called urging us to leave. He had even bought us plane tickets. I thought about it but decided to stay. This house was the first home Javier and I had bought after we got married. We had lived here for over 40 years. A few years ago we even renovated it. I wasn't ready to leave. On the day I went to stock up on supplies, I drove to the supermarket alone and filled my cart to the brim. After checking out, I stared at the 2 overloaded bags of groceries and against my better judgment called Javier. He didn't answer. Then I remembered, he had mentioned he would be seeing Renee off today. Sighing, I pushed the cart outside and began the arduous task of loading everything into the trunk. As I bent down to lift another bag, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. Javier. With Renee. Behind them, Renee's son Hugh was pushing a shopping cart overflowing with supplies. They looked harmonious. Anyone passing by would assume they were a family of 3. Javier spotted me and came to an abrupt halt. His eyes immediately dropped to the heavy bags at my feet, his brows furrowing. "Why are you lifting all that by yourself? You should have called me, I would have helped." "How thoughtful." I pulled out my phone and waved it at him. "I did. You didn't answer. I assumed you were at the airport." His expression tightened. "I'm sorry. I must have left my phone on silent. Renee's flight was cancelled, so I came with them to pick up some supplies." Before I could respond, Renee stepped forward with a warm smile. "You must be Leslie. Javier talks about you all the time. He wasn't exaggerating when he said you're kind and gentle. It's so lovely to finally meet you." I returned her smile. "How are you feeling these days? Did you enjoy staying here?" "Oh, I love the climate," she said brightly. "Javier actually invited me to stay and settle down here. He's been so generous, he even helped you find a job in town. Looks like we'll be seeing each other often. I hope that won't be a bother to you and Javier." I felt my stomach turn. "Oh, that's wonderful," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "Congratulations on finding a place you love." I didn't care to dissect her words, nor did I have the energy to untangle the truth from the lies. But I knew without a doubt that Javier had lied to me. The flight hadn't been cancelled. Daniel had called me earlier and told me there were still flights out today. Without another glance at Javier, I turned on my heel, climbed into my car and drove away. Javier and I met in college, where we shared some of the best years of our lives. We were young, ambitious, full of dreams and aspirations for the future. Ours wasn't a whirlwind romance born of love at first sight, but rather a slow and steady pull. 2 people drawn together through the quiet accumulation of time and understanding. The day Javier confessed his feelings for me, he was honest about his past. He told me about Renee, the girl he had once loved in his youth, the one he had shared his early dreams with. But then he took my hands in his and said, "The past is gone, buried like yesterday's sunset. My heart belongs to you now. For the rest of my life I will cherish you, honor you. This is my promise, as true as the rising sun and the setting moon." And after we married, he kept that promise. He supported my career wholeheartedly, took pride in my successes, never once making me feel small. At home, he wasn't like other men who shrugged off responsibilities. He shared the burdens, doing his part without complaint. For decades, I never once doubted his love, his integrity. Javier was a man of principle, steadfast and honorable. But for Renee, he lied to me. The very morals that had defined him, that had guided him throughout his life, none of them seemed to matter anymore. A tight, invisible net wrapped around my chest, squeezing, suffocating, filling every breath with sharp, stinging pain. Through the reflection in the car window, I saw my own face, streaked with tears, pale and hollow. My cheeks were as cold as my heart. By the time the hurricane made landfall, Javier finally returned, battling against the wind and rain. I had already filled every possible container with water, charged all our devices and prepared the house as best as I could. I dragged the sofa into the corridor away from the wind, where Javier and I huddled together, waiting for the worst to pass. The storm battered the windows, shaking the house to its core. I felt dizzy, the relentless force of nature making my head spin. Just as the nausea crept in, Javier pulled me into his arms. He was old now. His arms, once strong and firm, had lost their strength, his skin marked with wrinkles and age spots. But these were the same arms that had held me through every stage of our life, through youth and middle age, through hardships and joys. No matter what, whenever I needed them, they had always been there. Dazed, I heard my own voice ask, "Is Renee really staying here for good?" "No, Leslie," he said immediately. "She's leaving after the hurricane. You have to believe me. I helped her younger son Hugh find a job, but I never invited her to stay. But she'll be going back to stay with her older son soon, not here." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to say something else, but before I could, his phone rang. On the other end, Renee was crying. She sounded terrified, her voice trembling as she pleaded, saying she was scared and needed him. Javier's voice softened instantly. "It's okay, Renee. Don't be afraid. The hotel is safe. Just hold on a little longer. I'll come as soon as the winds die down. Don't be scared." The illusion of warmth shattered. I said nothing and curled deeper into the corner of the sofa. Javier looked at me, hesitating as if searching for the right words. But in the end he said nothing at all. When the eye of the storm arrived, the winds died down, granting a brief moment of eerie calm. Javier stood up immediately. He grabbed his keys, preparing to leave. I watched him in silence. At the door he turned back. "Leslie, just stay here. I'll be back soon." Javier left. I rose from the sofa and stepped onto the balcony. Below, he was fumbling with the electric scooter, trying to get it started. I called him. "Javier," I said quietly. "I'm scared too. Can you stay?" There was a long pause. Then he sighed. "Leslie, we've lived through hurricanes for decades. We know how to handle them. But Renee, she's different. She only came here because of me. I can't leave her alone." And with that he hung up. I stood there watching his figure disappear into the storm. And suddenly I remembered another hurricane, 30 years ago. That time Javier had been at the lab, too busy to come home. I had been alone, just like tonight, hiding in the corridor as the storm howled around me. I had been younger then, scared, shivering, desperate enough to call him. And the moment the eye of the storm arrived, he came back. He had returned for me, soaked in rain and mud, his eyes filled with nothing but worry and urgency. That night he drove me to safety, maneuvering past fallen billboards, dodging uprooted trees, constantly looking over his shoulder, as if afraid the storm might come crashing down on us at any moment. Back then, I had held his hand tightly, believing with all my heart that he was the best decision I had ever made. But now, as the eye of the storm passed, he was gone, off to comfort another woman. And I was left behind. The hurricane shattered the living room window. Glass littered the floor, furniture was overturned, and the space that had once been our home was now unrecognizable. When Javier returned, I was already packing. I greeted him first, my voice calm, steady. Maybe it was my composure that unsettled him. Or maybe it was his own guilt. Either way, I saw the panic flicker in his eyes as he clumsily knelt beside me, attempting to help. "Leslie, Renee is fine now. She'll be leaving once flights resume in a few days." "It doesn't matter." I stopped what I was doing and met his gaze. "It doesn't matter, Javier. Whether Renee stays or leaves when she leaves, it has nothing to do with me anymore. We're getting a divorce. You're free to be with her if that's what you want." "Leslie, don't say that." His voice wasn't angry this time, just pleading. "You're upset because I went to Renee's last night, right? Let's not make any rash decisions. Take some time to cool down and we'll talk." "Javier, I am calm." I gestured around us. "You knew I would be angry. You knew I'd be afraid. And yet you still chose Renee. Last time I asked you to think about what you really wanted and you hesitated. But I don't need to wait for your answer anymore. I've already seen it for myself. I'm divorcing you. Not because of whether Renee stays or goes, but because this is my choice, one I've thought through carefully. And you know me, Javier. Once I've made a decision, I don't change my mind." His expression froze. The plea in his eyes deepened. "Does it really have to come to this? Leslie, I swear to you, Renee is leaving. She and I won't have any connection after this. Can't we go back to the way things were? 40 years together, Leslie. You can't just walk away from that." Emotion overtook him, and for the first time, I saw tears spill from his weary eyes. I sighed. "Javier, for more than 40 years I never once doubted your love. But Renee's return made me realize something. I was never your first choice. I was just the person you settled for. You can argue that you never broke our vows. But can you really say with certainty that your love for me was pure all these years? Leslie, we've spent a lifetime together. Does it really matter if you were my first choice or not? I was faithful to you. That's what's important. Yes, your loyalty mattered. I met his eyes, unwavering. But now, I don't even know if in all those years you were good to me, you were thinking of me or her. There's nothing left to say, Javier. This is exhausting. I've already contacted a lawyer to draft the divorce papers. My bags are packed. I'm moving out today. When the paperwork is ready, I'll reach out. We can file for divorce at the courthouse. Before leaving, Javier and I cleaned up the house together. This house carried over 40 years of memories. Every corner held traces of our past. In the end, I didn't move out. Instead, Javier packed his things and moved into another property under his name. For several days, he stopped answering Renee's calls. On the first day flights resumed, he went to the airport to see her off. When he returned, he brought my favorite flowers. But I knew there was no going back. His disappointment, his sorrow, none of it stirred any emotion in me. All that remained between us now was the bond of two people who had once walked through life together. Daniel flew in the same day he found out we were divorcing. His reaction was intense. "Mom, I don't understand," he said, his voice urgent. "You and Dad have been together for so long. He just spent a few days with an old friend. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Mom, if Dad had cheated, I'd support your decision completely. But look, Renee is gone now. Can't you and Dad just go back to the way things were?" His eyes searched mine, full of hope. I sighed. "You make it sound so simple," I said quietly. "But if I drove a thorn into your heart, would simply pulling it out make the wound disappear?" "This isn't up for discussion, Daniel. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm informing you. You've been married for years, you have your own family. My divorce from your father won't affect you. And you don't have to worry, I won't be moving in with you and Mila. I won't disrupt your lives." I met his gaze, steady and unshaken. Daniel hesitated, his expression shifting with unease. Then suddenly his voice rose in frustration. "What are you saying? Do you think I wouldn't take care of you? Do you really see me as that ungrateful?" "Enough." Javier spoke, his tone calm, measured. "Don't argue with your mother. We've already made our decision. We both have homes, savings, and pensions. We can take care of ourselves. You don't need to worry about us. It was something we had already discussed. We owned separate properties, so even after the divorce, neither of us would impose on our children's lives." Daniel still wanted to argue, but Mila gently pulled him back. She turned to me, her voice softer. "Leslie, Daniel isn't against your divorce because he's worried about himself. It's just, you and Javier aren't young anymore. If you live together, at least you have each other to rely on. If you separate, who will take care of you when you're sick?" She took my hand, her concern genuine. "I know this hurts you, but are you really willing to throw away decades of marriage because of someone who doesn't even matter anymore?" I patted her hand reassuringly. "I know you're both looking out for us, but marriage isn't something you just settle for. Even though Javier and I are divorced, the years we spent together don't disappear. It's not like we'll never speak again. We'll still be there for each other when it matters." Hearing this, neither of them tried to dissuade me any further. The divorce process went smoothly. On the day we received the final papers, Javier and I shared a quiet dinner together before parting ways. At the street corner, I turned back once. He was still standing there watching me, his eyes rimmed red. I took one last look, then turned away and walked on without hesitation. After the divorce, I suddenly found myself with an abundance of free time. The next day, I signed up for a floral arrangement class. In my younger years, I had been consumed by school, then work, then family. Even after retirement, I spent years helping Daniel raise his children. Javier and I had planned to travel together in our later years. Now those plans had changed. Instead, I decided I would still travel, but alone on a long road trip, setting out on a journey that belonged solely to me. I remained in the same house, and sometimes out of habit I would still call Javier's name without thinking. After all, his presence had been woven into the fabric of my life for decades. Untangling it was not so simple. To keep myself busy, I signed up for community volunteer work in addition to my floral classes. Every morning after class, I would put on my volunteer vest and roam the neighborhood with a few friends, looking for people in need of assistance. Life became lively and full again. One afternoon after finishing my work, I was walking home when I saw Javier standing at my doorstep, waiting. I hesitated. He had been coming by every few days, but I had been avoiding him. Our divorce had seemed calm on the surface, but after loving someone for a lifetime, to have it end in such a painful way, it left a lingering resentment in my heart. I instinctively stepped back, hiding behind a tree at the street corner, unwilling to face him. Just then a figure rushed past me and grabbed Javier's sleeve. "Javier," Renee's voice rang out, filled with urgency. "Why didn't you tell me you and Leslie got divorced? If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have even known. How could you be living alone like this?" Javier flinched, clearly startled. He glanced around, then carefully pulled his sleeve from her grasp. "I thought you left. Why are you back?" Renee's eyes reddened, her voice soft with emotion. "Hugh told me about the divorce, so I came back right away. Javier, I can't just leave you alone. Let me take care of you from now on." Javier was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. "Renee," he said slowly, "I know my actions over the past few weeks caused misunderstandings. Both you and Leslie misread my intentions, and that's why she left me. I was happy to see you again after 50 years. I wanted to be a good host to make sure you were taken care of. But I need you to understand, I don't have those feelings for you anymore. I know this might hurt you, but I have to say it. After we parted ways all those years ago, I met Leslie. And from that moment on, my heart belonged to her." Renee reacted instantly. "It doesn't matter," she blurted out. "Javier, I don't care about your love for Leslie. It doesn't matter if you don't have feelings for me anymore. I just want to stay by your side, even as a friend. That's enough for me." Javier fell into silence. Then after a long pause, he exhaled and spoke in a quiet, firm voice. "Renee, I may be divorced, but I can take care of myself. You don't have to go to such lengths for me. If you visit Florida, just spend time with Hugh. But don't come looking for me again." With that, he turned and walked away. Renee stood frozen for a long moment before finally, hesitantly, following after him. I stayed hidden behind the tree until they were both gone, then stepped out and walked home, my emotions tangled in knots. Javier's words stirred something deep inside me. For the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet sense of relief. At least the past 40 years hadn't been a mistake. For the next month, Javier didn't show up again. I heard that Renee had been persistent, refusing to let go, until finally Javier lost his patience and said something harsh enough to drive her away for good. Meanwhile, I completed my floral arrangement course in 2 months. On the day of my final class, I used my savings to buy an RV. 2 days later, I packed a few essentials, took a deep breath, and hit the road. Behind me, another brand new RV followed at a steady distance. It was Javier. I knew, but I never acknowledged it. I traveled across the country, documenting my journey on Instagram. Slowly, my account gained traction, drawing in followers who enjoyed my solo adventures. All the while, Javier trailed behind, not too close, not too far, never interfering, never speaking. 3 months later, I arrived in Chicago. The first place I visited was my alma mater, the very place where Javier and I had met all those years ago. That night, for the first time, I invited him to join me. Together, we retraced our steps, walking through the places we had once wandered as young students, capturing new memories in photographs. After months on the road, Javier looked noticeably better, his posture stronger, his eyes clearer, holding the same quiet admiration he had once shown me in our youth. When it was time to leave the city, I waved him goodbye. "The rest of the journey," I said with a small smile, "I think I'd like to see on my own." Unexpectedly, Javier's appearance in my posts caused my account to go viral. It all started when a follower recognized him as the man from Hugh's widely shared love story months ago. Soon, people flooded my comments asking for confirmation. More and more users began prying into my relationship with Javier, eager to know what had happened between him and Renee. The sudden surge of attention felt overwhelming. So, I made a simple post explaining the situation. I clarified that Javier, Renee, and I had all moved on with our separate lives. There was no lingering drama, no unfinished business. Once people understood the full story, many were left speechless. But the real uproar began when internet sleuths returned to Hugh's original post, leaving a flood of new comments. One particular comment caught everyone's attention. "I know the woman from Hugh's post, Renee. When they first shared their story about her searching for a long-lost love, I found it ironic because I'm her neighbor. Her story sounds touching at first, but if you look at the timeline, she married someone else right after she and Javier split up. She had 3 sons and 2 daughters. None of her children turned out particularly successful, and after her husband passed away last year, she struggled financially. When she set out to find Javier, she bragged to the neighbors about how amazing her first love was. She claimed she was going to reunite with him and that he would take care of her. She even mentioned how he could help her sons land good jobs. Looking at it now, this so-called reunion after decades apart was nothing more than a calculated plan to leech off him. I don't know why it ultimately failed, but it did break up Javier's marriage. And now she's back and her children are furious with her for failing to secure her first love's financial support. She's having a rough time. The internet erupted. People who had once genuinely rooted for their love story felt betrayed, realizing they had been fooled. The backlash was swift and relentless. Hugh, whose account belonged to Renee's youngest son, was bombarded with criticism until he finally deleted his profile. As for Renee, without savings or support, she found herself in a dire situation. She was pitiful, but I felt no sympathy for her. She had gambled everything on deception, and this was the price she paid. The internet's interest burned hot for a while, then as always moved on to the next topic. I, however, remained focused on my journey, traveling, capturing moments through my lens and sharing the beauty of the world as I saw it. Javier still messaged me every day, sharing snippets of his journey. Whether it was the taste of a morning coffee or the wildflowers blooming by the highway, he described everything in meticulous detail. Sometimes I would reply telling him about my own travels. We spoke like old friends, casually exchanging stories. Yet neither of us dared to acknowledge the deeper undercurrents beneath our words. A year later, I finally fulfilled a dream from my youth. I made it to Alaska. I had always longed to visit that vast land, to witness the northern lights, to experience the raw serenity of nature untouched by the noise of the world. But life had always gotten in the way, postponing the trip again and again. When I finally arrived, Alaska's brutal climate struck me with an unforgiving force. I wasn't used to the biting cold. Every breath felt like inhaling shards of ice, stabbing deep into my lungs. My hands stiffened against the steering wheel until I could barely grip it, and I had to hire a local guide to help me navigate the journey. One afternoon, I stopped at a small cafe in Fairbanks, wrapped in layers of scarves, clutching a cup of steaming hot cocoa, trying to warm my frozen fingers. That's when I saw him. Javier stood at the street corner outside, staring into the distance, his gaze fixed on the snow-capped mountains. He had lost weight. Snowflakes clung to his coat, dusting his shoulders, making him look lonelier than I had ever seen him. Yet despite the years, despite everything time had taken from us, I recognized him in an instant. He turned, his eyes catching mine through the cafe window. For a moment he hesitated. Then a smile spread across his face. A smile that took me back 40 years, to a sunlit afternoon on our college campus when we first met. He stepped inside and sat across from me, ordering a black coffee. Neither of us spoke right away. We simply sat there watching the snow fall outside the window. "Why Alaska?" finally asked. He smiled faintly, shrugging. "Wanted to see the northern lights." He didn't explain further and I didn't press. I stayed in Alaska for a few more days, but the weather never grew any kinder. The cold seeped deep into my bones, making even walking difficult. Eventually, I had no choice but to leave early. I headed south to California. In San Francisco, I rented a small apartment by the ocean. My days became slow and peaceful, drinking floral tea, watching the golden sun sink into the waves. And then once again Javier appeared. It was sunset. The sky burned in hues of crimson and gold, stretching endlessly over the water. He walked along the shoreline, his steps unhurried, the sea breeze ruffling his graying hair. Without a word, he sat beside me. We watched the sun disappear beyond the horizon, the sky deepening into twilight. Then, as the night crept in, he slowly reached out, his fingers brushing against mine as if seeking permission. I didn't look at him. I simply stood up and walked back inside. From that day on, Javier resumed silently following me on my travels. Neither of us expected that life's biggest surprises often arrive without warning. I had planned to hike the Grand Canyon when I received a call from Daniel. "Mom, Mike got into Northwestern. We're throwing him a celebration party. You and Dad have to come home." Warmth filled my chest at the news. Northwestern University. The place where Javier and I had met, where our youth was etched into every corridor and lecture hall. And now our grandson was about to walk the same paths, carrying our story forward. So I decided to turn around. But on the way back, disaster struck. While driving through the Rocky Mountains, an unexpected landslide thundered down the slopes. A deafening roar erupted behind me as a cloud of dust and debris swallowed the road. Instinctively, I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering. Then I turned, searching for Javier. All I saw was his RV overturned on the roadside. My mind went blank. Other cars screeched to a stop. People ran toward the wreckage, voices shouted all around me, but I heard nothing. I could only point, my hands trembling, desperately gesturing for help. Someone spoke to me, their words lost in the haze of my panic. Then the world went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the warm hues of twilight spilling through the window. An IV was attached to my hand, my head heavy with dizziness, but my thoughts remained clear. A nurse walked in, her voice gentle. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," I murmured, managing a weak smile before my chest clenched with urgency. "The man who was in the accident with me, how is he?" The nurse nodded reassuringly. "Oh, you mean that gentleman? He was injured a little more than you, but don't worry, no major issues. The rescue was quick. No concussion, just some bruises and a minor fracture. He's resting in the next room." Relief flooded through me. As soon as my IV was done, I forced myself to my feet and walked straight to Javier's room. He was sitting upright, his forehead wrapped in bandages, his arm in a sling. He looked exhausted, more worn than I'd ever seen him. The moment his eyes landed on me, concern overtook his face. "What are you doing here?" His voice was filled with disbelief. "I saw your car flip over, I thought." He struggled to rise, reaching for me instinctively, as if only by touching me could he be sure I was truly okay. I pressed him back against the bed. "I'm fine. But you, on the other hand, won't be making it to Mike's party." Javier frowned, visibly frustrated. After a pause he muttered, "You should go. Take a flight, it's safer." I sighed, shaking my head. "You're too old to be left alone while you're injured. I'm staying to take care of you." For a brief moment he seemed startled. I continued, "I'll call Daniel and let him know. Once you're well enough, we'll head back together. We can celebrate with a family dinner instead." His expression softened, something unspoken flickering in his gaze. Then his fingers brushed against mine, his voice rough with emotion. "Leslie, thank you." I patted his hand lightly, offering a small smile. "Javier, you and I have decades of history. That doesn't just disappear. What we are to each other, it goes beyond love, beyond labels. At this age, anything short of life and death is no big deal. No matter what happens, we'll always be part of each other's story." Javier sat in silence, his eyes clouded with thoughts I couldn't decipher. I stood, stretching, and added casually, "So get some rest. Once we're done with the party, I've got more places to see. Don't slow me down." He let out a quiet laugh, his eyes glistening slightly. "Sure, Leslie, sure." After the accident, I stayed by Javier's side as he recovered. I didn't fuss over him or smother him with attention, but I was there, making sure he took his medication, reminding him to rest, and handling all the small, everyday things he often forgot. And Javier, for the first time in a long while, allowed himself to be taken care of. It's like we were back in the very old good days. After Javier recovered, we made our way back to Chicago to try catch up for Mike's celebration dinner. Our road trip back home was slower than planned, with frequent stops so Javier could rest. During the way, we visited quiet lakes, had small-town diners and scenic viewpoints, not rushing to get anywhere, simply enjoying the journey. It reminded them of our early days, when life wasn't about responsibilities or regrets, but about discovery, about sharing simple joys. When we finally reached back in Chicago, I can sense that something has been back, some feelings that maybe both Javier and I haven't been enjoyed for quite a long time. The evening for Mike's celebration dinner was lively, filled with laughter, toasts, and the proud glow of parents and grandparents alike. For the first time in years, Javier and I sat side by side at a family gathering. He refilled my glass of wine before his own, subtly pulling my chair closer when someone squeezed past behind us. Small gestures, ones I had taken for granted for decades, now felt like whispers of something unspoken between us. That night, as we sat on Daniel's back porch watching the city lights flicker, Javier exhaled slowly as if he had been holding something in for too long. "Leslie," he said, his voice softer than usual. "I've been thinking a lot since the accident. About everything." I sipped my tea waiting. "I spent a long time following you on the road," he admitted. "At first I thought I was doing it because I wasn't ready to let go. Because I wanted to make sure you were safe. But after Alaska, after the accident, I realized it wasn't about the past anymore. It's about now." I turned to look at him. His eyes, aged yet familiar, carried none of the hesitation that had once lingered there. "I thought about what would have happened if that landslide had taken you away," he continued, his fingers gripping his knee. "How many more years I would have had to live knowing I wasted the time we still had left. I don't want to waste another moment, Leslie." I looked at him for a long while. The man beside me wasn't just the man who had loved me for over 40 years. He was also the man who had hurt me, disappointed me. But he was also the man who had chosen, after all of it, to stay. I reached for his hand. He exhaled in quiet relief. From that night on, we stopped dancing around the inevitable. Instead of traveling separately, we made plans together. I still had destinations on my list, and Javier, after years of chasing memories, finally allowed himself to be part of my present. We took the RVs to the Grand Canyon, hiked through the Appalachian trails, even spent a summer in Maine eating fresh lobster rolls by the docks. But it wasn't just the grand adventures that made our time together special. It was the small, everyday moments. The way he always made sure my tea was brewed just right, how he automatically handed me the fluffiest pillow whenever we checked into a new place. The way he still instinctively reached for my hand when crossing a busy street. Then one autumn, life gave us another unexpected turn. Javier fell ill. Nothing life-threatening but serious enough to put him in the hospital for a while. Sitting beside him in that sterile room, I watched as exhaustion dulled his usually sharp eyes. And for the first time since we reunited, I truly saw how much time had passed. We were no longer the college kids stealing kisses between classes. We weren't the young parents juggling work and family. We weren't even the middle-aged couple navigating the aches and pains of growing older together. We were in the final stretch of our journey. And it was slipping by faster than either of us could hold on to. One evening, as I adjusted his blankets, he reached out and caught my wrist. "I used to think we had forever," he murmured. "But we don't, do we?" I swallowed against the lump in my throat. "No, we don't." He gave a weak chuckle. "So what do we do?" I sat down beside him, threading my fingers through his. "We love each other while we still have time. We make the most of every sunrise, every quiet night, every little moment we're given." A silence stretched between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence built from knowing someone so deeply, words weren't always necessary. Javier squeezed my hand. "Thank you, Leslie, for still being here." Tears pricked my eyes, but I smiled. Where else would I be? When he was discharged, we didn't go back to separate RVs. We moved into a cozy lakeside cabin, our last great adventure, this time together. The days passed in golden hues. We woke up with the sun, read books on the porch, cooked together, traveled when we felt strong enough. We argued, we laughed, we reminisced about the past. Javier wrote me letters, something he had never done before. He left them on my nightstand in my suitcase, tucked into the pages of my journal. He wrote about the day he met me, about the years we spent raising a family, about the mistakes he made, and the gratitude he felt for the second chance. One evening, as we sat by the fire, he looked over at me and said, "You know, I always thought love was about passion. About choosing someone once and never wavering." He chuckled, shaking his head. "But real love, Leslie, is choosing someone again and again, even after you've seen every one of their flaws. Even after you've hurt them. Even after they've left." I reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "And you? Do you still choose me?" Javier looked at me, his eyes filled with all the years we had shared. "Every time. Life was not perfect. Never would be. But as long as we had each other for however much time remained, that was enough."